police officers charging into your home as you're having a bath.
It was very, very frightening. I've had nightmares and everything about it, and I've got cameras on my house and stuff. I keep them on and make sure the doors are always locked now, because it's not even the public that anyone needs to be scared of these days. It's the police.
Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. And of course, we'll be watching that interview again later in the show. When I come back, I'll let you know what else is happening.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
Your home is your castle. We're calling on the government to introduce and immediately pass the Stand on Guard law.
But we also need to resolve to resist.
Okay. We'll do it live. Okay. No. We'll do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Krayden, and I'm broadcasting to you today live from very snowy Ottawa. Hope you're having a good December. Christmas coming. The goose is getting fat. Please put a penny in this old guy's hat. And we'll be advertising the merchandise later. We hope we have some great Christmas gifts for you there. So what are we talking about today? Well, there's a great drama going on, twofold drama going on in the House of Commons today. Well, let's say the Parliament buildings, because of course there's a vote today on a Conservative motion to support a pipeline through Alberta to the West Coast, to the Pacific Ocean, through British Columbia. This, of course, is part of the Memorandum of Understanding between Prime Minister Mark Carney and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, which both of them have been crowing about for the last 2 weeks. This was absolutely seminal. This was monumental. This was groundbreaking, earth-shattering. And Pierre Poilievre has never bought it. He never really has bought the idea that Mark Carney wants a pipeline built, whether it's fully funded by the private sector or not. Because every time a Conservative asks a question about the pipeline, Mark Carney is very loath to get up and support it. He usually has his environment minister stand up, or his natural resources minister stand up and talk about how it's going to be great for climate change. So I think this is a brilliant move by Pierre Poilievre to demand the Liberals put their policy where their mouth is, their big mouth is. And we'll see what happens. The other drama unfolding, of course, is Bill C-9. Last I heard, it's on again in committee. And as I said at the very beginning, you saw that little clip from Piers Morgan Uncensored. I think it's more like Piers Morgan self-censored at times. But that we're going to show you that again today by popular demand, because people are saying, I can't believe this is happening in the UK. And if bills like C-9 and the resuscitated Online Harms Act, which I keep saying is probably going to be called the Online Safety Act, bills like that are going to strangle freedom of speech in Canada. And if we can get this C-9 stopped, and if we can continue to build a coalition between those on the right and the left, conservatives, liberals, socialists, if we have to, whatever, whoever really values free speech, get on board and fight. Get on board and fight and join the petition, and we'll have more about that later. Because we've got to stop C-9. We stop C-9, we got a better chance of never seeing a revived Online Harms Act. That's exactly where we are. So we'll be discussing C9 and a little later in the show. And I've got a clip for you from Katie Pasitney, who of course is continuing to fight for justice for what happened on her farm. And hope you enjoy that. And we'll also, as I said, be showing you this 10-minute, no, about a 9-minute clip with Piers Morgan and the woman in the UK who was arrested by 11 cops for a private text message. It's incredible. So, without further ado, here's what happened in question period.
If they want to combat their own cost of living crisis, the Liberals would focus on approving pipelines that would sell more oil, boost our Canadian dollar so Canadians could buy affordable food and homes. In fact, there was such a pipeline, the Northern Gateway. Liberals killed it in a 2016 cabinet decision, a decision the Prime Minister supported. They further blocked it with a Liberal ban on tanker traffic off the northwest BC coast. The Prime Minister claims to have changed his mind in a recent MOU. So will he be able to change the minds of fellow Liberals and vote for his own MOU and allow a pipeline to the Pacific?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, it's a sad day because the Conservatives are divided. The Conservative premiers across this country support this MOU in its entirety. The leader of the opposition is seeking to divide this country, and we can see through that cynical tactic. The MOU is about building a strong country. It's about doing it in an environmentally responsible way in partnership with Indigenous peoples. It would be great if the opposition joined all the other Conservatives and all of us in building this country strong.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, that's exactly what we're trying to do. In the spirit of Christmas, I decided to take a great act of generosity and lift the words right out of the Prime Minister's MOU in order to support a pipeline to the Pacific and a repeal or an overriding of the Liberal tanker ban. Now, of course, it would mean Liberals would have to admit they were wrong to block that pipeline. They were wrong about the tanker ban. Will, in the spirit of Christmas, Liberals admit they were wrong, vote for their own wording, approve a pipeline, and get rid of the tanker ban?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, in the spirit of Christmas, I'd invite the Leader of the Opposition not to cherry-pick parts of the MOU, but to support the entire MOU, which is what all of the Conservative premiers across this country are doing, which is what this side is doing. It's how we will build strong. Stop being cynical and build this country with us.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, I think the only division here is that the Prime Minister is divided against himself. The Prime Minister opposed the pipeline to the Pacific. Now he claims he supports it. He supported the tanker ban. Now he claims he opposed it. Mr. Speaker, this is the Prime Minister who said he wanted to keep half of our oil in the ground, and now he pretends to have changed his mind. He signed an MOU. He says one thing in BC, the opposite in Alberta, and here in the House of Commons he hides under his desk. Why would the Prime Minister stand up, take a position, and announce that he's voting in favour of his MOU language to build a pipeline?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Well, as it turned out, and we'll watch a bit of this interview, Carney government to vote against the Conservative motion on pipelines. Well, what a surprise. And of course, they're saying it's got nothing to do with their support for a pipeline. There just wasn't enough in that motion about climate change and about the industrial carbon tax and about Alberta adhering to all of this. So, but this is all a cop-out. This is tremendous cop-out from the Carney government. I think it is highly indicative of how Mark Carney really feels about this. Let's watch a bit of this interview with Andrew Scheer, Conservative House Leader, Saskatchewan MP, with Vassie Capellas. And I realize Vassie has a host of publicists out there, unofficial or unpaid, I hope they're unpaid, publicists who just think every time she interviews anybody, she's doing a masterful job. I think she misses the point here, actually, with this interview with Andrew Scheer, because she keeps saying the MOU is highly specific. And I think Scheer actually proves her wrong.
Again, pleasure to welcome you back to the studio. When Premier Danielle Smith signed this MOU with the Prime Minister, she said, quote, "It's a great day for Alberta and Canada." Are you saying the Premier's wrong?
Well, we just don't believe that provincial government should have to sign on to something like an increase in the carbon tax. A Conservative government would not impose that type of condition on a province. We're pro-energy. We don't believe that that the government should make it harder to get things built. We think the government should make it easier to get things built, set the rules and make it apply to everybody. So what we're saying is that two things. One, there are conditions in this bill that aren't necessary for the construction of a pipeline. And the second thing is we don't believe Mark Carney's actually serious about getting it done, because he's got this very complex and complicated MOU with lots of conditions, and then he immediately goes out and says these are necessary but not sufficient, meaning that even if the government of Alberta clears all these hoops and hurdles, that he still might say no. He said the British Columbia Premier gets a veto, and now we're hearing rumors today that they're going to vote against their own MOU tomorrow in a Conservative motion. So that's why we're saying that this MOU is not great. We believe that the federal government should be partners in prosperity, helping provinces get to yeses, not saying one thing in Alberta and something completely different in Ottawa.
A couple of different things. So I didn't hear unequivocally that BC from the Prime Minister has a veto. He certainly talked about BC needing to agree, but I've asked his ministers on multiple occasions because of what your party has brought up. Does that mean that there is effectively, not even constitutionally, but effectively a veto? And everyone I have asked has said, no, that's not the case. Second of all, what your party seems to be inferring by putting this motion forward is that there is ambiguity, right? A lot of ambiguity within the MOU. Again, I'll put to you, the Premier doesn't seem to indicate at any juncture that that's the case. And even when you read through the text, like I would have guessed also that it would be ambiguous to allow for multiple different possibilities. But it is incredibly specific. Construction of one or more private sector constructed and financed pipelines with a route that increases export access to Asian markets as a priority. It is agreed this pipeline would be in addition to the expansion of the TMX pipeline. Like, that is not ambiguous.
Well, you are right about the deliberately misleading Canadians on terms. And you talked about the veto. Mark Carney is getting famous for this, by the way, saying something and then contradicting himself in the next sentence. So when you say that a premier has to agree for it to proceed, that's a veto. I mean, you can call it something else. You can say you're trying to dance around the language. But if at the end of the day, David Eby refuses to approve, refuses to sign off, Mark Carney is saying that his approval is necessary. So if that in fact blocks the pipeline from going ahead, then he's effectively got a veto. I don't think Canadians want to play semantics about word definition. I mean, I love going into word origins and things like that, but Canadians want clarity, they want certainty. And if you look at the entire MOU, there's a whole lot of conditions on there that Conservatives would never impose on the people of Alberta or the government of Alberta. And he immediately comes to Ottawa and says, even if...
I think Andrew Scheer is making a very good point here, because this is a question of having it both ways. If you say BC must agree, well, you might not want to call that a veto. Maybe it's not a veto in law, but it effectively amounts to a veto. So they want it both ways. No, BC doesn't have a veto. Yes, BC must agree to the project, because this is the sort of double talk the Carney government is so adept at.
Even if the government does all this, even if the government of Alberta does all this, he says it's not sufficient. It still might not go ahead. And then we hear, Liberal MPs saying that it'll never get built. So what our motion is attempting to do tomorrow is to provide that clarity, give Liberals an opportunity to vote for their own MOU. We've lifted language right from the MOU. If they vote in favor, then that would send a signal that they're at least going to back up what they sign on to. If they vote against it, or if half their caucus votes against it, it's going to be sending a very different message to Canadians. And what we're trying to show Canadians is that Mark Carney has spent his entire life fighting against energy development. He wrote a book called Values, where he defined himself as a human being and talked about the need for higher carbon taxes and leaving up to 50% of Canada's natural resources in the ground. So he's trying to reinvent himself and turn him into something that he just has never been. And the motion tomorrow is an attempt to provide Canadians clarity about who Mark Carney really is.
But is it an attempt to be political, because it is an issue that that their party doesn't fully agree on, and to exacerbate those differences when ultimately the Prime Minister did sign this MOU, right? Like, I take your point on things he said in the past. I certainly have questioned him about that. But he has gone further than I can remember any federal Liberal going in putting down in paper in very explicit and specific terms exactly what this pipeline would look like, where it would go, how much extra oil beyond what exists right now in the capacity to export it would entail. Like, again, this is not ambiguous. He is signing his name to it.
Well, if you look at everything that's happened since the MOU was signed, there's a lot of ambiguity. And if Mark Carney had to come out, sign this MOU and said, I look forward to the day shovels are in the ground and I support pipelines, he still hasn't even said that. Mark Carney still hasn't even said that he would like to see this proceed. He just says that these are conditions that are necessary but not sufficient. That's a very clever Liberal politician phrase to basically say two things at the same time, that it might happen if you do this, but it might not happen, even if you do all that. It's just incredibly confusing. If the Liberals had to come out of this MOU signing with clarity, with full-throated support for the men and women who work in Canada's energy sector, excited about the prospects about opening up Asian markets to Canadian energy, we'd probably be debating a different motion tomorrow. But the fact that you've got Liberal ministers saying something completely different than what the Prime Minister said when he was in Alberta, the fact that...
But doesn't your caucus not agree on everything? Like, isn't that a part of a democracy? Like, there's not everyone is going to feel the exact same way. Ultimately, it's the person in power who's going to decide the direction of the party and the government.
But even Mark Carney and Cabinet can't even provide that assurance to Canadians that if the government of Alberta succeeds in clearing all these new hoops and hurdles and all this the new conditions that they've imposed, they still can't even clearly say whether or not a pipeline will actually get built.
But that's what the MOU does say.
Yes, but they've contradicted themselves immediately afterwards. That's the point. They haven't been able to clearly even stand behind their own MOU. The ink it still isn't dry yet, and you've got senior Liberals talking it down, senior Liberals saying it'll never get built. So this is an opportunity for Parliament and for the House of Commons, for every MP to clearly stake out where they are. Don Davies and the NDP, very clear. They're against pipelines. Conservatives, very clear. We support our energy sector and want to see Canada develop it more and get off of the dependence of the U.S. market. Mark Carney and the Liberals try to say two things at the same time. One thing in Alberta, something completely different in Ottawa. We just want some clarity so that Canadians can hold this government to account.
There's enough clarity.
I think Andrew Scheer stated the case excellently in that interview. And I don't think Vass is getting the point that this is clearly they're playing both sides of the street. Liberals love to do that. Before we get back to the farm here, I want to show you, this is very, very disturbing. And this is what happens when relations between Canada and the U.S. deteriorate to the extent that they have. And Donald Trump is now talking for a tariff on potash. And any kind of food war is bad for not just business, but it's bad for the national health. And the consequences can be far-reaching. Let's listen to this.
So you talked about the profitability issue, the machinery playing a role in that. And fertilizer plays another role now. A lot of that, the way I understand it, it comes in from Canada, different countries like that. What are we doing to bolster domestic fertilizer production to help make that more affordable? And then I think that will transition down the pipe.
One of the things, a lot of it does come in from Canada. And so we'll end up putting very severe tariffs on that if we have to, because that's the way you want to bolster here. And we can do it here. We can all do that here. But I would say what you do, you put very severe tariffs on from coming into other countries. You'll be making your own fertilizer very soon.
In fact, Secretary Burgum.
Yeah, very, very dangerous precedent here. Even Joe Biden, when he was president, didn't start putting tariffs, even on Russian fertilizer, at the height of the acrimony over the war in Ukraine. Even Joe Biden didn't put tariffs on fertilizer coming from Russia and never considered it for Canada. Putting a tariff on something doesn't automatically make everything better. Does the United States even have sufficient potash reserves for the agriculture sector? Remember, the United States is still number one in agriculture. And when we had retired Colonel on recently to talk about, he talked about the fact the United States is number one in two things now. It's number one in agriculture, it's number one in armament sales. And if you erode either of those, it gets very upset. So I'm not sure that the United States is even able to furnish adequate potash or fertilizer for the agriculture sector, which is massive, huge, long growing season in the United States, and that's very important. Now, before we get to the rest of the news today, I want to show you and let's have a look at some of the stickers that we've been flogging lately here. We just love this stuff here. This is very, very proud of these. I think there's something here for just about everybody. And Christmas is coming. Have a look at the store. You know, we have done so much to enhance and increase the choices at this store, and I think we're quite proud of that. Quite proud of that indeed, and encourage you all to have a look. I guess I've got a few more to show you here. Yeah, and here we are with the psyops. Big Brother. Now there is a perfect Christmas present for anyone. Yeah, I'm going to show you one more here. Yeah. And of course, we encourage you to get an ostrich hoodie. In fact, I'm going to be wearing that for an interview this afternoon. Katie Pasitney of Universal Ostrich Farms will be joining me this afternoon. I think we'll probably record that interview for broadcast tomorrow. But of course, spoke to Katie yesterday, and she put out a brief message yesterday on Facebook, but it's quite interesting because she talks about the 84 missing ostriches. So what does she mean? Well, we're gonna find out more about it when we talk to her this afternoon. But here's what she had to say yesterday about this.
Hi everyone, Katie with Universal Ostrich Farms. It's been a weekend. I tried to spend some time with my kids. It was my niece's birthday, and in all of that, with all the joy that I felt, I've had a really hard time. And I mean, it's to be expected. My mom phoned me in tears. She's still very broken and she's hurting, of course. We're very upset. We're very on point to be fighting for justice for every one of those birds that died a malicious and evil death. But the pain is real and we have to identify with that. I got a phone call from a supporter today, and the healing that has to happen here for everybody, there is so much healing that has to happen. But we have to remember that we need to stay there for each other. And we have to remind each other that we're not alone. Now, I did make a little post. It's been really hard to stay focused. I've had some anxiety to do with what's happened, as I'm sure a lot of people around the world I know that are suffering with just sleeping at night. It was only 32 days ago that this happened. And it's been 11 months, almost 10 months for our family along a ride of terrorism by the Canadian government, Canadian Food Inspection Agency. But it's been 32 days since almost 1,000 gunshots, too many, shattered the peace of our home, and CFIA waged war on our innocent animals and brought their weapons to our land. today I need to share something that's shaken us even deeper, which a lot of you, I think, may have already heard. I know Luca put it out. A woman at the Vancouver landfill, who was part of receiving the ostriches at the landfill, said that they needed to do a count. So they had to roughly count as the animals are coming in, and when they were being dumped, all of that precious life of 35 years, that they could only do a count of roughly about 230. So we're asking the question, I mean, every Canadian should be determined at getting the answer to, and that's, where's the missing 84? Where did they go? And why were they not accounted for? So, and why, 2 weeks after CFIA worked through the night, which we all know, they were working through the middle of the night, was the number 79 spray painted on the inside of our kill pen that got built on our farm. A kill pen that should have never existed, and where CFIA was supposed to maintain custody of our animals, and they weren't to do anything else. I have so many notes. So because where we stand, that interim stay that Supreme Court granted was an interim stay order that bought CFIA time to prepare. Time to prepare the kill pen behind our, right behind everybody's backs. They're not feeding our animals. They weren't watering them properly. There was animal cruelty happening in front of all of our eyes. And that is what that interim stay order really bought, was them time. So they had their answer long before the world did. And we do know that the Supreme Court of Canada gave them time to prepare. And the minute they were ready, they started. And not with compassion, not with science, and not with empathy, and no love, and no respect for the living souls that those animals were, but with the barbaric cruelty, shooting our healthy, terrified animals that were running for their lives. Birds who had grown up together for 35 years, protecting one another and trusting humans, and trusting us that we would be able to save them from any kind of barbaric action like this. And when they died at the hands of the very species that we got them to trust. Every day we wake up, we look at the empty pens when we make our way down to the end of the laneway. When we're there, my mom doesn't leave. It's safer and more comfortable for her at home right now. The mess that CFIA left behind, that hay pen, not the hay, but the straw, the bedding that's everywhere, blown up bales, and they cut all the strings on the full ones just so we can't even move them and lift them. And then I think all this destruction that they were allowed to walk away from under the RCMP protection. And I think that's also one of the hardest things for the human mind to grasp. How was this allowed? How did this happen? And is this really Canada?
And we'll hear more about this tomorrow. And that's the question. How much of Canada is still here? And arguably, it's not much left. So I want to have a look at some of the stories here on the X site here. Always something here. And of course, yes. This is incredible. Why is the New York Times is actually now reporting that Zelensky, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, is fully corrupt and has been salting away money for years. Now, why, is the question I ask you, why is Anita Anand and Mark Carney sending and bragging about Canadian taxpayer money being sent to Zelensky when the New York Times and New York Post have both reported the excessive corruption which the Ukraine regime is now being charged with? So, Here's what's happening with Bill C9, though. You all know Sean Fraser, that incompetent cabinet minister who utterly failed in other portfolios, including housing and immigration. Now he's failing as the Attorney General. Seems like the deal he brokered with the Bloc Québécois to take the religious exemption out of so-called hate speech was not approved by the Prime Minister. In fact, he never even mentioned it. So there's a bit of a stall tactic going on here right now because committee was canceled once. What we're hearing this morning is the committee is on again today. Justice Committee that has been examining this bill, but not too closely. Not too many witnesses opposed to it. So we encourage you to get the word out that this is very, very dangerous. And we need to keep fighting this bill. And here's Anita Annette. Canada continues to support Ukraine, no matter how bad Zelensky is. I love this post from Andrew Lawton, the Ontario Conservative MP, who really led the charge in the House of Commons against Bill C9. He says, I see Sean Fraser is bringing to his work as Minister of Justice the same level of excellence he brought to immigration and housing. That's wonderful. There are a lot of people now realizing how dangerous this bill is. Very, very dangerous. Now this is fascinating here. Let's watch this. Think before you share. Well, that means self-censorship. That's what that is. And, you know, this is clearly a psyop directed at every one of us. And that's, you know, that is exactly what this is about. So these are not easy times for the Carney government, but Mark Carney really doesn't seem to care. Remember, who cares? Who cares? And so I want to applaud the good work of people like Andrew Lawton, Michelle Rempel Garner, and Dr. Leslyn Lewis, who's also done some great work exposing the potential and the obvious hazards of Mark Carney's censorship and surveillance bills. I want to get to this video again, because if you missed it yesterday, you will not believe what's going on here, because this is absolutely frightening. Absolutely frightening. And we're gonna put that on right now.
You again. Pleasure welcoming you back to the studio. When Premier Danielle Smith signed this MOU with the Prime Minister, she said, quote, "It's a great day."
Let's try again.
Police officers turned up.
Yeah.
They basically said you had committed a hate crime by using that F word in a private text message.
I was in utter shock.
If the state can pry on our private conversations, that really does take us into Orwellian territory.
Well, we'll talk about the F word again shortly with my panel who are standing by, but Tucker Carlson's claim that I could be arrested was saying for saying it was based on a real story he'd read in the Daily Mail. A nursing home worker had been arrested and convicted, he said, for using that word in text messages about a man she claimed had assaulted her. As I said in the interview, it sounded utterly ridiculous. Latest in a string of examples of an assault on free speech in the UK. But I hadn't actually read the story, and I said I'd look into it afterwards. That's exactly what I did, and I'm pleased to say that Elizabeth Kinnney, the mother of 4 who was convicted over her text messages, joins me in the studio now. Elizabeth, thank you for coming in and joining us today for this debate. Just first of all, just to clear up exactly what happened to you, explain to me and the viewers.
And I should mention, because we made sure we did not put the word in here because it leads to potential problems. But the word she used in a private text message was F-A-G-G-O-T, which a lot of people have pointed out to me. The short term of that, F-A-G, still refers to a cigarette in the United Kingdom. And in fact, when I first started journalism, he used to say, I had a fellow editor where I first started out, and he was a well-seasoned journalist originally from Great Britain, had settled in Canada, had seen it all, and he used to like to say, I'm dying for an F-A-G, usually about 10 o'clock in the morning. So I just put that out for your interest.
What went down?
I was assaulted by a male acquaintance. And
Physically or sexually?
Physically. Physically. It wasn't my ex-partner. It was a friend, like a group of friends. The female acquaintance that she was getting jealous over me because she started seeing my ex-partner. So she was trying to cause trouble for me, which ended up resulting in me getting attacked. After that, obviously, I went to the hospital and I sent her messages and pictures of my injuries, just to prove like what she'd caused. And obviously, I was very upset at the time. I'd had a inflammation on my brain. I had a skull fracture, which made me not really feel like myself at the time. I was very upset and I was very angry with what had happened to me, which made me say messages that I really wouldn't have said.
So you sent her a load of messages. I mean, would you categorize them as abusive, highly abusive?
It was more just to pointing to the fact that what had happened to me. I only just sent her pictures of my injuries, and obviously said why would you cause this much trouble for me and stuff, and make up lies, and which now resulted in me being attacked. And
she then reported you.
Yeah. For
what she said were harassing messages.
Yeah, it was a 5-minute period of time when I just.
How did you feel when the police contacted you?
Well, I was shocked. I didn't expect that. I mean,
because these are private text messages.
Throughout my life, I've had messages with my friends, and we've fallen out, and we've said things that aren't very nice to each other. But you would never really expect that to go any further than that.
I've heard 11 police officers turned up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's completely ridiculous.
Yeah, I'd left my front door open. I was waiting for my dad to come to the house. I was actually in the bath. And
11
they opened the door themselves.
And just came in?
And came in.
And you're in the bath?
Yeah.
And what do they say to you?
Well, I heard.
I mean, this is just so incredible. Not only are these private text messages, why would you send 11 cops to a woman's house who has apparently all she's done is use a word you object to in a private text message, and you walk through her front door uninvited just because your front door is not locked doesn't mean anybody can walk in. Then they go upstairs to the bathroom, crowd into the bathroom. Only one of the cops is a female. The rest, the 10 of them are male cops who apparently are really enjoying this. I find this incredible, just incredible.
My name which was one female out of the lot of them.
And 10 male officers.
Yeah. And then I heard my name, and I thought, oh, it might be my sister, because it didn't sound like someone who was, because obviously I was upstairs in the bath. And then they just come up the stairs, and they didn't give me any privacy or anything. Like, I had
You were naked?
Yes.
How did that make you feel?
Disgusted and really upset. I was crying my eyes out.
And what did they say to you? What did they say they were there for?
Well, I was just asking them, can they just leave the female officer, and can they please go downstairs? As obviously I was upset, and I had no clothes on, and he kind of wanted to watch me get changed, and I was very upset about that. In the end, they did send the males down the stairs, and the female officer sat with me. I was crying my eyes out. I was really upset, and then I said, "Well, what are you even here for?" Because I was.
You know, if 11 cops walked into my bathroom when I was having a shower, I think I'd be a little upset too. I mean, it's just, this is absolutely so outrageous, it's beyond the pale. And the fact she actually had to negotiate to get these buggers out of her bathroom is incredible to me. And who committed the crime in this instance? I ask you that. Who committed the crime? Somebody with a private text message that's none of their damn business? Or 10 gawkers who came in the bathroom? Because that, to me, amounts to sexual harassment at the very least.
I was shocked. I was in utter shock. And she said, for malicious communications, hate crime and malicious communications. And I said, well, what for? And they said, we'll discuss that when we get to basically to the police station.
So you go to the station, and then they outline that it's these messages you sent to this friend that you've had this argument with, all connected to the fact that you yourself, as you say, have been assaulted. I'm not going to get into that so much. Is one of the more inflammatory things about this whole story, which Tucker Carlson picked up on, was in the course of these text messages, you use the F word. We've already said what that word is. He repeated it many times. I choose not to say it. You can do what you like. But that word, did you intend it in the messages to be a derogatory, homophobic slur?
Absolutely
because
not.
that is the alleged crime, is that you were promoting hate towards gay people by using that word.
First of all, a lot of my friends are gay. I am not homophobic in any way, shape or form. The word in question is a word that in our town where we live, we associate that word with somebody who, well, mainly males who hit females. Like, it's never a word for a sexuality. It's always a word where we live in our context, as in, like, basically a weak person. For instance, my brother's best friend got sent off the pitch in football last week because one of the guys fell over, and, you know, he called him that name, but it was just a joke, but he got sent.
And this, of course, is precisely why so-called malicious communication or hate speech, or however you want to describe it, this is why it's flawed. Because hatred is in the ear and the eye of the beholder. This woman wasn't even using this word in the context that many of us might think of it. She had her own reasons for using that word. But yet the government has declared, well, that's a hateful word. Therefore, you should be charged for expressing that word. This is so anathema to freedom of expression. Let common sense rule, not unwise laws. And we'll get on with it.
Off the pitch, because but in our context, like, it just means, like,
and you got a heavier. I mean, in the end, you pleaded guilty. First of all, why did you plead guilty?
My solicitor told me to.
Right.
And I've never been into trouble before, and I was really concerned about.
You had no criminal record.
No.
Because the malicious communications offences, which is under which you you were prosecuted, such as sending grossly offensive messages, can receive a hate crime sentence uplift if motivated by hostility towards a protected characteristic like race, religion, sexual orientation, or disability. So you got an uplifted sentence. They basically said you had committed a hate crime by using that F word, which, given that you had no intent to be homophobic with it, for the reasons you've outlined, just seems preposterous.
Yeah.
In a private text message to somebody.
I didn't even say it to the person.
Who you were angry with because you had been assaulted.
Yes.
Has anything happened about the assault?
When I was in the hospital, the police were called by the doctors and nurses, and everyone in question were arrested at that given point. Then I ended up getting arrested a week after that.
And what's happened with the...
No one ever came back to me to discuss that. No one wanted statements from me. They were just obviously more... It seemed like they were more...
There's been no prosecution?
No.
So the fact you were assaulted was deemed to be less serious, it would appear, than the fact you'd used this F word in communication, private communication with this woman you'd had a falling out with?
Yeah.
What do you feel about that?
Very, very disheartened and upset. It's destroyed my character as a person. I've been a care assistant since I was 17, and I want to be a nurse. I like helping people. I want to save people's lives. I have got a good character. As obviously, I'm still working in my post now. My managers haven't let me go for the reason being they know me as a person.
They stood by you.
Mm-hmm. Everyone's got my back in this.
What reaction have you had from the community?
Everyone's had me back, and everyone's been so supportive. I mean, I've not heard one bad word said about this whole, that everyone's just as disgusted as I am, how far it's got.
I didn't even know it could be a crime
Neither
to, in a private message,
Neither did I.
Use language like that.
Neither did I.
What do you think it says about free speech in this country?
Well, it's not as heavy as it is in America, but I believe that...
Actually, it's better in America.
Yeah.
This would never have happened in America.
Yeah.
Their First Amendment protects your right to be offensive if you want to be.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not, it's one thing if you came in and said, I said all these things and I stand by it and I wanted to be homophobic, that's one thing. But you had you were angry because of what had happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
You were in a hospital getting treatment for injuries sustained in what you say was an attack. And I don't know, obviously, about that side of it, but I'll take your word for it. And then you have 11 police officers charging into your home as you're having a bath.
It was very, very frightening. I've had nightmares and everything about it, and I've got cameras on my house and stuff. I keep them on and make sure the doors are always locked now, because it's not even the public that anyone needs to be scared of these days. It's the police.
It's the police you need to be afraid of. And that's how it's getting in Canada. Ask Katie, who were they afraid of at the farm? It was the CFIA and the cops. I want to share something with you here from my good friend Nico Logan, who I guest on his Wednesday night show every week, The Conservative Corner. We have a great conversation. Encourage you to watch that. 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, Wednesday nights. We'll be there again. I want to show you this. All I have to do is find it. We're looking for Nico's post here. All right. There we are. We'd find it one of these days.
They're criminalizing an emotion. Intense dislike is criminal, but mere dislike is not.
What are the biggest issues with Bill C-9?
The first problem is that there's already a problem in the criminal code. Bill C-9 makes things worse, and that is the existing provision that prohibits hate speech, 319 subsection 2. Everyone who, by communicating statements other than in private conversation, willfully promotes hatred against any identifiable group is guilty of an offense. But what is not in there right now in the criminal code is a definition of what hatred is. And that's one of the things that Bill C-9 is providing. Hatred means the emotion that involves detestation or vilification, and that is stronger than disdain or dislike. The emotion that involves detestation is now prohibited, but the emotion that is mere dislike is not prohibited. But what does detestation mean? If you look it up, one of the ways detestation is described is intense dislike. Intense dislike is criminal, but mere dislike is not. So where is the line between intense dislike and mere dislike? Nobody knows that. They're criminalizing an emotion. Criminal offenses typically have two different kinds of elements, things that the prosecution must prove. Number one is the act. Did you do the thing? And the second is the intent. Did you intend to do the thing? This is a third thing, not act. It's not intent. It's emotion. Emotions have no place in the criminal law. What they are essentially doing is saying this: two acts that are both wrong, if one of them is committed with the emotion of hatred, that one is worse than the other one. So let me give you two examples. Let's say somebody attacks you on the street. Actually, you're having a bad day. You get attacked twice. The first is an attack by a guy who attacked you for no reason at all, just because you were there. He doesn't know you, doesn't care what you are. The second situation, you got attacked again by somebody who looked at you and said, I don't like the look of his face, or I don't like the color of his face, or I don't like his background, and so I'm going to attack him. In both situations, the attacker harmed you to an equal extent. Question: which of those two offenses is worse?
It should be both equal, right? Because the act was the same in both cases.
That's my point, but not in the law. The law now says, oh no, if you do it with hatred in your heart, you are a more serious offender than the other guy who couldn't care less. That doesn't make any sense.
There's some others with the idea of, hatred against identifiable groups. And that's because it doesn't really apply to everyone. If someone were to attack me or my son, my 17-year-old son, who's a white guy, that, white devil or whatever, or clearly motivated by that, they would not be charged with a hate crime.
You're exactly right. This is a means by which to establish two-tier justice. It is a tool in the hands of the state to decide who they prefer, be lenient on, and who to prosecute to the nines.
Wow. Now that was worth watching. I'm going to see if I can get that professor on the show, because I'm in total sync. We don't need hate crime legislation. We don't need hate speech legislation. It should all be eradicated from the criminal code. It's dangerous. It's counterproductive. It is completely fraudulent in its design, and it's completely toxic in its delivery. And we need to get rid of it if we have any vestige of freedom left in this country. I think of this. There's a great line from the movie Gods and Generals. And the Confederate General Stonewall Jackson talks about the consequences of losing the war between the states, the Civil War. And he says, if the North loses this little war, they'll just return to their factories and their banks like nothing ever happened. He says, if we lose this war, we lose everything. And that is exactly where we are in Canada right now. If we lose this fight for our freedom of speech, let me tell you, folks, it doesn't matter what's in this budget. It doesn't matter how long Mark Carney can survive as Prime Minister. It doesn't even matter if Sean Fraser continues to be Attorney General for the next 6 months or a year. We lose everything foundational to our democracy if we lose our freedom of speech, and we're on the precipice of doing that. I cannot overemphasize this enough. if that's not a little redundant. I cannot overemphasize the need to keep fighting back. And we're going to be doing that every day on this show. Thank you so much for watching today. I'll be back again tomorrow, hopefully at the same time, 10 o'clock. I'm trying to get back to a regular 10 o'clock slot here. And like I say, we'll be talking to Katie Pasitney later today about her recent experiences. Thank you for watching. God bless you all. And we'll be back again tomorrow. Bye. Thank you for sharing this station with your friends and family. Thank you for hitting that like button, because I tell you, we are fighting back in a way I've never had to before, because I'm going to keep this station on the air. I'm going to keep fighting for freedom. I'm going to keep fighting for justice and truth. And I am damn determined to resist this Carney government in any way possible as it encroaches upon our individual freedom. And it will continue to do that, mark my words. I'll be back again tomorrow. Same time, same place. 10 a.m. This has been David Krayden, broadcasting live from our nation's capital in Ottawa. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow.